As we have already noted, during the modernization, the power elements of the body were modified, in particular, the side members and the attachment points for the door hinges. As for corrosion resistance, there is no significant difference between the machines of the first and second phases, as well as between copies of Korean, Russian, or American assembly. But they usually bring damaged cars from the USA, and there a lot depends on the quality of the restoration. An unbeaten Santa Fe is in no hurry to rust, but the paintwork is thin and delicate, so chips occur quite quickly. And it all depends on how deep they are and how quickly they are eliminated. Still, given the decent price of the car, owners try not to spoil its appearance, so the cars are mostly neat and with a minimum of serious body problems. Well, they play out in small things in terms of equipment and electrical equipment. The body holds up, but the contacts oxidize as a result. Problems with the trunk button or rear view camera are not something special, they are commonplace. The gas tank flap drive fails, the keyless entry system malfunctions, and the running lights stop lighting. Finally, the multimedia system collects a lot of complaints. It's a pity, because the salon itself retains its good appearance for quite a long time. But don't let him mislead you, you need to check functional equipment with passion. Which engine is installed under the hood of the Santa Fe offered for sale largely depends on what specification this car is. American cars are usually found with a 2.4 GDI gasoline engine, 190 horsepower, although some have also driven a cheaper, but at the same time more playful 2.0 turbo, 264 horsepower. But for the Grand Santa Fe, a 3.3 V6, 290 horsepower, was reserved in the lineup. It is unprofitable to drive such cars due to high duties, so the 3.3-liter versions are usually of Russian specification. I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carmi.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what brakes and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with, and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carm.pro. Santa Fe, sold in the Customs Union, was equipped with a 2.4-liter MPI gasoline engine with distributed injection, 174 horsepower, and after restyling, a 3.0-liter V6 engine with direct injection, 249 horsepower, began to be installed on the Grand Santa Fe with. Also offered for sale were cars with a 2.2-liter CRDI diesel engine, 197 to 200 horsepower. The latest engine is from the European line, so it can also be found on used cars imported from EU countries. There was also a 2.0-liter version available, 150 to 184 horsepower. And if we are talking about gasoline engines, then European cars may do with a 2.4 GDI engine, 192/188 HP. Well, which option is preferable? 2.4-liter engines with both distributed and direct fuel injection have approximately a common set of features and disadvantages. The biggest potential nuisance, especially on cars before restyling, is the risk of crankshaft liners turning due to insufficient oil pressure. These engines also have cylinder scuffing, one of the reasons being said to be destruction of the catalyst. Note that these internal combustion engines use an aluminum block with cast iron liners, so relining may be a solution. It is recommended to reduce the service interval to 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers. But before purchasing, it would be a good idea to find out the service history and check the condition of the cylinders using an endoscope. The gas distribution mechanism does not have the most durable chain drive, usually it lasts about 150,000 kilometers. Moreover, it does not have hydraulic compensators, which makes it necessary to check and adjust the thermal clearances of the valves. Phase regulators may also require replacement over time, but this may also have to do with the quality of the oil used. It is believed that engines with direct fuel injection have a not very durable, but rather expensive injection pump. However, Russian owners usually encounter this problem, which can be explained by the unstable quality of the fuel. Also, these engines are characterized by the problem of carbon deposits on the intake valves. The latter also applies to the 3.0-liter V6, but its main problem is the progressive oil consumption due to waste due to the occurrence of piston rings. Preventive measures include reducing service intervals and flushing the oil system with special chemicals, which helps only at an early stage. There are no hydraulic compensators here either, and the chain drive also cannot be called eternal. As a matter of fact, to one degree or another this is also true for version 3.3. Taking into account the above, as well as decent fuel consumption, V6 engines pretend to be those money vacuum cleaners. So the decision to buy a Grand Santa Fe should be weighed. So we come to the point that, perhaps, it is worth looking towards diesel versions. They can be considered quite reliable, but they are not without drawbacks. At an early stage, issues with the EGR and particulate filter on European cars are typical, but in the future the fuel injection pump can cause problems. There have been cases when the pump began to drive chips, killing the delicate injectors. Some engines experience increased oil consumption as they age, but this may be due to the aggressive driving habits of their owners. Still, this phenomenon is not widespread. Racers will also finish off the 6-speed automatic transmission. As usual, the gearbox has an early locking of the torque converter, so that friction where products accumulate in the oil at an accelerated pace. Aggressive driving only aggravates the process. As a result, the valve body suffers. Therefore, the service intervals for the box should be maintained at a minimum, and in the case of severe operating conditions, reduced. The manual transmission is reliable, but the dual-mass flywheel makes replacing the clutch an expensive pleasure, so it's hardly worth chasing a mechanics for supposedly better reliability and cheaper operation. But in the case of front-wheel drive, based on the same considerations, this makes complete sense. No, the Magna multiplate electro-hydraulic clutch is quite reliable if you don't overload it on slippery roads or off-road conditions with slipping and fast driving, and don't forget to change the oil. This unit is even considered more durable than the previous one, used on the previous generation model. But the spline connection of the intermediate shaft and the right drive, which is destroyed by corrosion, is still considered the weak point of the Korean Hyundai Kia crossovers. The outboard bearing of the propeller shaft is also short-lived. Therefore, diagnostics of the all-wheel drive transmission is highly recommended. The suspension is tuned for a comfortable ride. At first, the smoothness of the ride is captivating, but on uneven roads, insufficient energy consumption appears, so when updating the model, this experience was taken into account. The car began to feel better on uneven surfaces. In general, Santa Fe is a lover of good roads. City cars are pleased with the durability of the chassis, but those who drive a lot and often in directions are more quickly faced with the need to replace support and wheel bearings. The latter come assembled with the hub and are therefore quite expensive. Those who like to make full use of the cargo and passenger capabilities of a spacious and roomy crossover may well encounter premature failure of the rear shock absorbers, as well as sagging springs. Otherwise, the suspension holds up well, but keep in mind that there is a multi-link installed at the rear, which can be expensive to repair, even taking into account the fact that, in general, spare parts are not that expensive. The parking brake cables are prone to souring, and in general the handbrake is considered not the most reliable component of the model. And you should definitely check if the steering rack is knocking or if there is any play in the steering. Santa Fe can easily be called a resource car, especially if we are talking about the body or chassis. But the transmission and suspension do not like increased loads, and the engines seem to be very sensitive to the quality of fuel and oil, and also have a number of vulnerable components. And the 2.4-liter MPI is no exception, except that it does not have the problems characteristic of engines with direct injection.